Jeff, can you make sure that they understand, keep it down? We gotta run a business here.
I don't know what happened, but the room filled up. We'll now resume the Queen Anne County Planning Commission meeting, Thursday, November 14th. Next item on the agenda is Major Subdivision and Site Plan SP 18-09-0014-C, Four Seasons at Kent Island, Phase 2. I will respectfully request, with the large volume of people in the room, that we be mindful and respectful to those presenting. When we get to public comment, we'll address that in a little bit. But please, I'm asking everyone to be quiet. If not, we will ask you to leave. So, thank you very much. Mr. Cahoon.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much.
The floor is yours.
Steve Cahoon with Queen Anne's County Department of Public Works. With this project, there's an awful lot to it, an awful lot of history, as well as the presentation of Phase 2. I plan on doing an overview of some of the previous approvals, some orientation to the property, and then the applicant will present the details of Phase 2. So
Expeditiously, I'm sure.
I certainly will. So the overall project, Phase 1, the overall project received preliminary approval for 1,350 units and a clubhouse. Phase 1 was 162 units. Phase 2 before the Planning Commission today is 249 units. Future Phase 3 and 4 will be 668 units. So that comes to a total of 1,079 dwelling units, and that's a mix of single-family homes and condominiums. There was a Phase 5 originally proposed with the project on the Tanner property, but that is no longer a portion of the project. Phase 5 required the applicant to secure a wetland license to build a bridge across Cox Creek in order to get to what was known as the Tanner property, and I'll show you some more detail on that. When the applicant couldn't secure the wetland license, it turned into a parkland donation parcel of 136 acres to the county, which reduced the overall project by 271 units. Just to orient everybody, I think if people are familiar, but Phase 1 is on the east side of Castle Marina Road, between the new traffic circle and Macomb Creek. This is under construction now. Approximately 60 units have been built and sold, and the condominium buildings have been permitted. At least one condominium building has been permitted, and that totals 106. That's units, lots, and 56 condos. Phase 1. Phase 2, 3, and 4 are located on what's known as parcel number 7, tax parcel number 7. It totals 338 acres, and that's going to be the focus of our conversation today and our review of this project. Phase 2 is what's before the Planning Commission. Phase 3 and 4 has been submitted for review, and the Planning Commission may see it in about a year after it gets through the development review process. The parkland donation is across Cox Creek. It's 136 acres. It's on the north and south side of the Cross Island Trail. It abuts to adjacent county parkland and along the headwaters of Cox Creek. And you can see the 300-foot shore buffer on that property has been established and will remain. And that is a passive park. It was not donated for active recreation. It was donated for passive recreation and conservation. The zoning on the properties, the different properties are zoned suburban or Stevensville Master Plan Development and Chester Master Plan Development. In the 1990s, the county went through a community planning process and designated these areas for planned development, understanding that they would be connected to public utilities and developed in a residential or institutional fashion. Parcel 7 has 245 acres in the SMPD district. That's the northern half of the site, so everything north of Castle Marina Road. And CMPD, it has 93 acres. These zoning districts generally allow anywhere from 3.5 to 6 dwelling units per acre, and this project comes in far below that. The CMPD and SMPD zoning districts were created to allow master plan development. The locations were specifically identified in the community plans, and it was a plan development where the Planning Commission would have a lot of discretion in setting setbacks, design standards to get good site design, have consistent architecture throughout the project, have functional open spaces that could be used and connected to public facilities, which would include water, sewer, roads, trails, walkways. These properties were identified because they could easily connect to existing infrastructure and be served. There were a series of approvals for this project: concept plan approval, amending it into the master water and sewer plan, developers' rights and responsibilities agreement, preliminary subdivision approval, and all these approvals build on each other to get us to where we are today. The critical area growth allocation was a big public process that where the critical area designations were changed from RCA to IDA on large portions of the property. That was vetted through public hearings at the Planning Commission, the County Commissioners, and the Critical Area Commission. And this is the existing critical area designations for the property. The red is the IDA, Intense Development Area, and on Parcel 7, that includes 267 acres and 54 acres of RCA, Resource Conservation Area, shown in the green. As you'll notice, the green area is the 300-foot shore buffer along Cox Creek, which is a protected area. The IDA is the center of the property where the development is occurring, all the way out to the Chester River. However, it's important to note that the shore buffer along the Chester River is to be protected as well. The growth allocation had a series of conditions. The conditions were included in the Planning Commission staff report in a memo from Lane Engineering where it identified what the actual condition of growth allocation was and how it was addressed on the plan set that was submitted. The major things that came out of the growth allocation process was 300-foot shore buffers along Cox Creek, 100-foot shore buffers along the Chester River, forest planting in the shore buffers and in areas where there wasn't forest existing, and preservation in the shore buffers where forest existed. No waterfront lots, building lots are being created. The condominium parcels and the clubhouse parcels as community open space will front on some of the buffers, but all the buffer and shoreline areas will be in community open space and no waterfront building lots. And the project was limited to one pier overall. At the time, this was some time ago before ESD to the MEP was required. It was, but there were practices that were required for this through the growth allocation process, and the subdivision, as approved during the growth allocation process, remains consistent as it's moved through approvals for preliminary in phase 1 and 2. The DRRA is a contractual agreement that basically holds the 2002 development standards in place while the project is getting approvals and under construction, but it also guarantees infrastructure requirements to the county throughout the build-out of the project. APFO was addressed during preliminary approval, and it was addressed for the entire build-out of the 1,350 units that were granted approval during preliminary. There were also, the APFO required the developer to build all the water, sewer infrastructure improvements, and then also a number of road improvements to secure their APFO approval. The improvements are consistent with what was represented in the DRRA. This is the preliminary plan approval, very similar to Phase 1 was built very consistent with the preliminary approval. Phase 2, I'll get into in just a second, But overall, the design was a major boulevard section going back to the clubhouse that would front on the Chester River or have views of the Chester River. Along Four Seasons Boulevard, there would be roads where the new lots being created would take access. No lots would access off of Four Seasons Boulevard. There were two main areas of multifamily or condominium buildings. One was just north of Bayside condominiums or Bayside development, and further up, up near the Cloverfield subdivision. This is the section that you'll be looking at today for Phase 2 approval. This is the preliminary approval, and you'll see it's going to be shown as very consistent. What's before the Planning Commission today is Phase 2 approval of a major subdivision to create 179 single-family lots, a parcel for multifamily lots, and a parcel for the community clubhouse. The clubhouse and the condominium buildings require major site plan approval. The clubhouse is proposed at the clubhouse facility, clubhouse and accessory buildings, is proposed at 26,566 square feet. This is an overall exhibit of Parcel 7. The shaded areas are the buffers and protection. The subdivision area of Phase 2 is just the area west of Castle Marina Road. The multifamily parcel is at the end of Castle Marina Road, a little bit towards the Chester River, and the clubhouse lot is all the way at the end of Four Seasons Boulevard that will look out at the Chester River, as mentioned. This is a blow-up of the lots or the section of Phase 2 where the single-family lots are proposed, and the multifamily parcel is right here at the end of Castle Marina Road to the right. The community parcel, 16.409 acres. That's the community parcel is shown in the subdivision set. The condominium site plan shows 5 buildings in total. The 5 buildings are 4 stories tall and have 14 units each. They have parking for each of the buildings, as well, and the parking's provided in a garage unit under the building, surface parking, and then there's additional parking for visitors and guests. Each section of the project has an extensive landscaping plan that goes along with it. As you received your packets, you noticed the size of them. There's a large set of engineering plans, landscaping plans that go along with this project that have been reviewed. But within the condominium site plan section, the condominium building section, there's landscaping proposed along the streets and the roads and the parking areas, as well as foundation landscaping around the building. This is a view looking down on top of one of the condominium buildings, and it represents the foundation landscaping that goes along with each of them, as well as screening of mechanical equipment, and as an example. The clubhouse facility includes a parking area for cars and golf carts. It includes a clubhouse, a full clubhouse building with indoor pool, dining facilities, meeting spaces, an outdoor pool. There's also outdoor courts, tennis courts, basketball courts, pickleball courts that go along with it. The stormwater management to address the stormwater quality and quantity is done within the parcel as well and shown on the site plan. And then also a variety of walking trails that connect into the remainder of the site. Also, there's an extensive landscaping plan that goes along with the clubhouse building, the parking lot area, and the walking trails for the clubhouse facility. And you know, that's really an overview of what we're looking at today, the subdivision site plan and for the clubhouse and condominiums. So,
Thank you, Mr. Cahoon. Are there any questions of Mr. Cahoon before we bring up the applicant? Hearing none, Mr. Stevens?
Mr. Chairman, I do have one
yeah,
question.
please.
Mr. Cahoon. You mentioned that the agreement provides that the development regulations that were in effect in 2004 are binding on us. What about changes in state regulations, state law, that sort of thing? We can't bind.
We've learned a lot about that. So that's a very, very good question. And throughout the time period from
Hold on a
2000.
second. I don't think this end of the planning commission heard Ms.
didn't hear
Tolliver's
what he said.
question.
I'm
So
sorry.
Mrs. Tolliver asked the question of if the DRRA holds in place development regulations at the county level, how do we address it for regulations that come down from the state level? So there's a number of things, like, for example, stormwater management regs. The plan was originally designed under the stormwater regs in place at the time, but due to the change in state regulations that required environmental site design to the maximum extent practicable, the project had to be redesigned to comply with them. Also, changes in other state regulations, they had to demonstrate compliance. Really, the areas that ultimately were frozen were the zoning districts, SMPD, CMPD. They're really what stayed in place, and those zoning districts and the regulations associated with them really have not changed very much during the lifetime of this project. But adjustments have been had to made to comply with state laws. The DRRA did not freeze them.
Okay, I just wanted to be sure of that.
Thank you, Planning Commission members. Joe Stevens, I'm the attorney for QACTV and Four Seasons and have been since its inception in the beginning, back when Mr. Cahoon and I think Mr. Drummond were involved for the county at their level. And so what I'm going to do, there's a lot of people here that I know that want to address you, and I've got a few speakers because I think it's important that the people who worked on this project present you with the highlights of information in that regard. So I'll just give you an overview of who's going to be addressing you. Lane Engineering, Barry Griffith will talk about the land plan, critical area compliance, buffers, and pathways and things of that nature. We've heard Barry speak many times before. We've received all critical area approvals, speaking of state laws. So not just the growth allocation back years ago, but they have been involved in every step and every plan we've put forward during the review process. They've been on site dozens of times, so they've been involved in the thick of this, right from the beginning to just the other day. From Lane, Tim Glass will talk about stormwater management. We meet the current ESD to the MEP requirements. We agreed to do that even though we're entitled to administrative waiver because of the DRRA that we received from the Department of Public Works in 2013. But we agreed as part of the conveyance of the Tanner property when we worked that out with the county contractually that we're going to do ESD to the MEP for the entire site. We've done that. Public Works has reviewed that, and those plans are complete, almost ready for signature. And then we're going to ask the traffic consultant to give you an overview. We received APF approval in 2004, which included traffic for 1,350 units. That locked in the improvements that we were going to be required to do. Steve put them up on the board for you. What the traffic consultant did was every phase the county has asked and given us scoping, what they want done, to do an updated traffic impact study and show if the findings back in 2004 remain consistent and where they do and where they don't, what might impact them. So we've done that every step of the way to show that that continues. What we projected in 2004 actually was high and conservative to what's actually happened, of course, taking the anomalies like the bridge issue into effect. So he'll speak briefly to that, and then Mike Irons and the land design planner, Lisa Biddle, will address you. So I'm going to try, we've tried, when we met yesterday, to go through all this. We said 8 minutes for everybody a piece. We'll try to do it even quicker than that. But if you have questions, if we're glossing over something, then just stop us, and we'll go from there. So with that, I'll ask Barry to start.
Thank you. Barry Griffith, Lane Engineering. We were retained January 2018 to assist QACTV with proceeding with phases 2 and then ultimately phases 3 and 4, which are the final phases of the project. And as Steve Kuhn did mention, but I'd want to reiterate, there is a very large set of site infrastructure plans, landscape plans, center road control plans. They're all available to you, but they weren't in your packet. So know that basically everything has been designed on this site so that it's ready to construct. We've been through the review and approval process with the county now for about a year, going through the details of those plans and getting them up to par. I'm going to start with this slide you see in front of you in an overall project location and phasing. And you can see, as Steve indicated earlier, where Phase 2 is, where Phase 1 is, where the future phases are. I just want to focus a little bit more on what is around us. So you see the Tanner Farm that Steve spoke to at 136 acres that was deeded to the county as open space. So immediately opposite Cox Creek, we have this 130-acre open space parcel. If you look at also on that same side of Cox Creek, we have the Clover Fields and the Mallard Run communities. And just to give you some reference in terms of density, the average density of that with about 1,150 homes on 577 acres is 2.1 dwelling units per acre. You also see that we sort of wrap around the Bayside, Queens Landing, and Castle Marina communities. That's 732 homes on about 131 acres. That's an average density of 5.6 dwelling units per acre. If you look at our project in total, with 1,079 homes on 405 acres, we're at 2.6 dwelling units per acre. And if you, while we can't account for it in our calculations, if you include the open space that was deeded to the county, we're right at or under 2 dwelling units per acre. So this is the context of the community that we're in. We're adjacent to some areas that are much higher density than us and some that are about the same as us. And on the other side of Cox Creek, we have a large amount of land in preservation, including the Davidson Farm, which is adjacent to the Tanner Farm, which the county acquired in 2007 as an open space property for the county. Moving on, this is the preliminary plat that Steve showed you. We are very consistent with this plat. We do have a few minor changes. Well, one major, the Tanner Farm came out, so that was about 130 acres and about 271 homes. But within Phase 2, some slight differences. The clubhouse, as you've seen its location, is adjacent to what were some old dredge spoil basins used by the state, I think back when the bridge was being constructed.
Kent Narrows dredging.
The Kent Narrows dredging. And ultimately, in 2015, the state decided those were going to be taken as jurisdictional non-tidal wetlands. They weren't back at the time this was originally planned. So we had to move the clubhouse building and parcels and facilities away from those dredge spoil basins to keep them protected as non-titles. We also made a few minor internal sort of block changes of lots within a block to make things fit. Another example, we had a large specimen oak tree that was smack dab in the middle of a lot that we knew if we could shift some things here or there, we could save that tree. So some little things like that occurred. And those are the major changes from the original plat. As far as Phase 2, we sit on parcel 7, as Steve said. You can see we've got the 300-foot and the 150-foot buffers. In total, we have about 28% of our site in protected buffers. That's about 97 acres. And that is, the legal documents are in place. They've been signed by K. Hovnanian. They've been signed by the county attorneys. And the open spaces and the forest, especially the forest protection, which I'll talk about in a minute, we're doing that for the entire parcel 7. This phase as well as the future phases that'll be before you. So we're protecting these forested buffers now with Phase 2. This is just what parcel 7 is. Again, this is our plat, our subdivision plat, where we have the single family, multifamily. One thing Steve didn't mention is that you'll notice none of these lots back up to another lot. There's open space interspersed between the backs of all these lots and throughout the community, in addition to the open space contained in the buffers and with the community parcel. So all in all, with phase 2, we have about 101 acres of open space that'll be protected through covenants. This is just a typical of one of the plat sheets to show you what I was just speaking to in terms of how the open space intertwines between the lots. And this is a diagram that shows kind of where all the open space is that's in the buffers as well. Lisa Biddle from Land Design is here, and she's going to talk to you at much greater length about the details and the amenities included with this incredible clubhouse area. So I'm not going to speak a whole lot to that, other than to tell you that it does have all the required parking to meet county requirements, as well as Hovnanian's needs for this type of active adult community. This is the condominium exhibit. Again, Steve's talked, Lisa will talk about this. What I'd like to point out here is that we do have a bermed landscape buffer and a sidewalk in between the Bayside property line and a road and these condominium buildings. The closest condominium building to the Bayside property line is 131 feet. And there'll be a landscape berm in between. And the highest point of this building is similar to what they are in phase 1, is 54 feet to the peak of the roof. This slide is here to show you the forest protection that's going on with phases 2, 3, and 4. There is, as you've heard, a lot of the buffers were left to start to naturally regenerate in a forest many years ago, and quite frankly, they're in a forest condition now. But there are some additional areas that we need to allow to go to afforestation. And we are going to be clearing some, mostly in the IDA portion. So there's still some woods to be cleared, about 54 acres. We've got about 68 acres of already established and protected forest conservation areas. There's going to be another 13 acres that need to be protected. There's the only forest that's being cleared that's not in the IDA is for some stormwater outfalls so that we can get our stormwater to get to tidal waters. All of this has been reviewed and approved very closely by the Critical Area Commission, and I know that plat sheet has a lot of complicated calculations on it, but we're basically at about 95 acres of forest protection on the project, which is about a fourth of the site overall. This is an example of some of the what the buffer's starting to look like. In some ways, it's kind of monoculture, but there's a 2004 buffer management plan that's still in force that allows to go in and take out some invasives, do some thinning, replant to get some diversity in there, and that'll be ongoing throughout the project. But it's going to be in a multi-canopy, diverse forest condition forever. It's protected. Pathways are very important in pedestrian access in an active adult community, which is what Four Seasons is. So in addition to the 5-foot sidewalks that run along every street, we also have an 8-foot sidewalk between a landscape berm and Castle Marina Road to connect from the traffic circle directly up into the street system of Phase 2. We also have about 11,550, so over 2 miles of paved 6-foot wide paths along Cox Creek and along the Chester River that are outside of the 100-foot buffer. So these are walking paths around the perimeter of the community. They're going to actually be in the 300-foot buffer and in the 150-foot buffer and in a wooded condition most of the time, but they're going to basically loop the perimeter of the community. We also have about 1,400 linear feet of spur trails, I'll call them, that'll come off that paved path on the Chester River side to go to some very prominent scenic points. And that will be within the 100-foot buffer. And also a path to the future pier. The Critical Area Commission, we've worked extensively with them on this path system, what materials would work, how wide they can be, how it should be constructed, and they're in agreement with this plan. So that's kind of an overall that I can give you. I'm the one that wrote the letter about growth allocation consistency that's attached in your package. If you have any questions about that, I can help answer that. And if you have any other questions about the layout of the project, I'd be happy to explain it to you as well. Yes, Ms.
This
Oliver.
may be a problem of scale on the plats, but you mentioned, and I noticed in the report, that all lots back to the community open space. And when I looked at the plat, it looks like several of them back up to other lots, like Lot 432, 433, 434, 410, 409, 215, 216, 218, 219, and there are others. I didn't write them all down. But it looked like on the plat that they back up to another property.
Well, I'd have to pull that sheet out, Ms. Tolliver. I can't tell at this scale either. There might be a situation that you're talking about. What lots were those?
Well, 432, 433, and 434. You can start there. 410, 409. I didn't write them all down. It was page 30 of 31. This
Page
is the
30?
page I was looking at.
Some of the cul-de-sacs, you may have that situation.
I don't think they were in cul-de-sacs, but I might be wrong.
Well, even there.
Yeah, there's still a little
Even
bit.
there, there is something there. I think you're looking at that cul-de-sac and it's where it says Phase 2.
I don't have my plan
Maybe.
open, but
There's actually, let me find it. There we go. Sorry.
Sheet 8. It's the only one I see. These don't. It's just right there. They're back.
You're right, there are a couple that do back up, but there's an open space in the center of those lots. There's a square in the middle on the particular lots you were talking about.
I think she's also talking about the ones up a bit, Barry, in here. They look like they're backing up to future phases.
Oh, the future phases?
Yeah.
Well, there's an open space right there too.
it just looked like they were backed up one to
and,
another,
yeah.
and you had that in your
There
report,
may be a
and you
couple of
also
cases
mentioned it here.
where,
There were several.
necessity dictates that they do, but for the most part, 90% of them are within, there's some kind of open space behind them, some kind of access behind them.
We're going to ask Tim Glass to come up and go over stormwater management.
Back and forth.
No, let him deal with that. You know how to work this, right?
Back and forth.
Back and forth.
Good afternoon. For the record, my name's Tim Glass, Lane Engineering. I'm the engineer of record for the project. As Steve and Barry both told you, obviously there are full-blown sets of engineering design plans ready to go to construction, have been through review, been through the county, been through critical area and so forth. You've heard that a few times. Our goal and really our directive when it comes to design specifically for stormwater, which is I'm going to highlight to you today, stormwater and sediment erosion control, is to have held the 2004 design, which you've heard us mention before, and then incorporate and really intermix current ESD practices into that design without fundamentally changing the orientation or the intent of the original subdivision. So we were able to do that throughout the entire design process. And oh, you guys are going back to the beginning, right?
Oh,
Here we go.
no, I think you're going to.
Okay. So what you can see before you here, what we were able to do, the prior design with pre-ESD really consisted of practices such as shallow wetlands, pond wetland systems, and extended detention wet ponds, which are all from the prior requirements back in Chapter 3 of the Stormwater Design Manual. And what we did was look forward into Chapter 5 current ESD practices, and we're looking at different strategies to address stormwater quality requirements under the current regulations by essentially retrofitting this subdivision prior design into something that met current requirements for stormwater management compliance. So with that, we wound up integrating all sorts of different ESD techniques, including submerged gravel wetlands, rooftop and non-rooftop disconnects, microbiretentions, and bioswales throughout the project. And the slide in front of you kind of summarizes the yellow diamond shape represents all of the submerged gravel wetlands. And those, it's important to note that those locations are consistent with the original design plans from a drainage and outfall perspective, so all those elements were maintained throughout the design. There was a feasible way to simply convert those to a current technique, which is a submerged gravel wetland, to meet ESD requirements. There are 12 of those facilities throughout the entire Phase 2 project that total over 5 acres of floor area to actually treat collected stormwater that runs off to those facilities. And then in each one of the drainage areas are intermixed within various locations therein, microbiretentions, which are demonstrated by that blue star. You'll see them scattered throughout the project in various locations. They're particularly with the condominium site. Those are located out front as landscaped amenities to catch water runoff off the front side of those roofs and treatment prior to discharge into the submerged gravel wetlands. And then finally, you'll see I guess that orange asterisk kind of talks about where all of the interspersed or the bioswales are, I'm sorry, that are linear facilities that are collecting runoff from behind houses and various tucked away places to treat water before it's dumped into a collection storm drain system. So the bioretentions consist of about a half an acre of surface area treatment, and there's over a mile of bioswales in the facility. And to summarize what was required, if you look at that first column where it says ESD volume required, that's actually the MEP test. There's an environmental site design volume that's required for all these developments, and that's a calculated number, which in this case totals 351,000 plus cubic feet of storage. The second to the last column talks about the total that has been provided throughout the various drainage areas on Phase 2 of 362,000 cubic feet and some change, which is essentially about a 3% overage of meeting MEP. So the ESD volume required and what's been provided is in excess of the requirement for this project. Similarly, with the Critical Area Commission review, there's a requirement for what's known as the 10% rule, and there's a phosphorus removal requirement associated with developments in the IDA in the critical area. And by implementing the ESD practices throughout this project, being the submerged gravel wetlands and all the things I mentioned, each one of those has a value that represents the phosphorus removal provided by that specific ESD treatment. In this case, you can see under the first yellow column, our requirement was just over 76 pounds of phosphorus removed, and what was provided was over 122 plus pounds, which is a 61% increase over what is required by Critical Area Commission law, and what we were able to achieve by the practices that we were able to intermix in this project.
Sorry, Mr. Glass, I'm going to interrupt. That's an annual reduction?
Yes, sir. One thing that's also important during construction particularly is managing stormwater runoff and sediment erosion control runoff. What this slide shows you is the totals. In the second column, there's ultimately storage that we have to provide to capture runoff from construction sites, detain it, treat it, filter it, and release it. And we'll talk more about that filtering later. But essentially what this is trying to get across is during the way the grading was done for this project, above and beyond the minimum requirements for the Maryland Sediment Erosion Control Manual, is that we've provided, if you look in the last column where it says 298, that's a percentage increase in volume that we've provided to capture and hold that stormwater before it's released from a capacity standpoint. So 196,200 cubic feet of storage is required. Additional storage provided, the second to last column, over the required is 388,924, which represents 298% of the required value there. Sediment erosion control design volumes obviously exceed what is required. It allows for a lot of different flexibility during construction to manage and capture that runoff for extreme storm events should they happen, so more flexibility in how to deal with that and for treatment before it's released overboard. So just in summary, the original design layout was held for the retrofit and the design. It's avoid and respects sensitive areas. We maintain our outfall conditions, the locations of all the original approved stormwater facilities pre-ESD. We've converted those to meet the requirements of environmental site design under current regulations and have also exceeded the ESD volume and the sediment erosion control volumes for the project. And that's all I have for you today.
I have a question.
I'm sorry.
I noticed in the critical area report that they were requiring at least 50% of the stormwater treatment to provide habitat benefit. Does this meet that requirement? And
Yes, ma'am, we believe it does. And the couple slides here I forgot to kind of go through, and this kind of talks to your question. I mean, a typical scenario for a submerged gravel wetland, and this is just a mock-up out of a landscape portion of the plan, and these are shallow wetlands that provide habitat. What they'll do is on the bottom of your screen, you'll see the couple of storm drain inlets that deliver water to that system, and on the left side is where that water would leave once it's treated. So there are going to be times where this system is inundated by water up to about 12 inches when it captures that first flush of runoff, and then it will settle back down, be filtrated through that gravel media and released after having been cleaned. And these facilities are planted, there's a similar example of one that provides habitat. There's landscape, it's more of a natural setting. This one has a temporary water on the surface water you can see. That will eventually drain back down to a drier, sort of a wetland area, and then when it rains, it gets wet again. This is a slide of a couple of actually the existing microbiome retention cells that have been constructed in phase 1 of Four Seasons currently. These are the microbiome retention areas that I was talking to you before that are intermixed around the various landscaping and open space areas of phase 2.
Where are you in the slides?
Yeah, that's it.
Mr. Glass, a couple more questions about stormwater while we have you, please. With respect to the clubhouse, submerged gravel wetlands that are on the Chester River side of that facility, this topic was brought up at the last meeting, and I'd like to pay it some attention here. I'm concerned slightly about the 5-foot elevation of storm surge and to above 5 feet, which appear to have that water, that surge, inundate your submerged gravel wetlands?
We've looked at the outfall elevations for that. I have to look at the design plans. The outfalls are outside of the floodplain in all cases there. So the one on here, floodplain elevation's been avoided, and the outfall, I'm going to go by memory for what the elevations are, but no, I don't believe there's an issue there.
Okay, well, I'm speaking specifically to the projected increase in sea level rise, land subsidence, increase in rainfall events, et cetera. And that 100-year storm that you just quoted will not be that 100 years, right? It's predicted to become much more frequent, much more intense, and in duration and severity. So my concern is the functionality of those systems if they get inundated with storm surge, right? Those treatment facilities don't like salt water, right? They're meant to treat freshwater runoff from your construction proposals. So I'm curious as to how the design and elevations of the facility themselves, as well as the outfall, will not allow saltwater intrusion into short circuit those systems. If we were to expect, we are going to, it's not an if, it's a when we will receive that projected storm level rise and the increased severity of rainfall events. So my concern is the functionality of those systems will no longer exist or will be significantly diminished if indeed we do get those increased storm surges, tidal inundations, et cetera. And I should have said it on the onset, I'm very impressed with the numbers you just proposed for your phosphorus removal. That's a hard critter to catch. And so compliments to you and your team in designing that, but I'd like I'd like some more reassurance and comfort that that will be maintained throughout the project lifespan as we see increase in sea level rise and precipitation events.
I think it's a tough question to answer. I think it's, the sea level rise issue has been talked about obviously on many different sides of that equation, but none of that discussion has really has landed with regards to Maryland state law or any provision specifically requires to address during the stormwater management design. The thing I could say is these facilities, if they were to back flush, they would wind up taking water in a reverse direction and filling up the available volume that's within that cell to an elevation above 5 or what have you, and it would simply just drain back out again. If that condition were to ever happen in the future, a modification working with Public Works or the owner and the community association to simply swap out some salt-tolerant root species plants to accomplish the same thing could be a reasonable remedy if that condition were to ever materialize.
Sure, but my understanding of submerged gravel wetlands is there are also microbiota that are incorporated in that submerged, saturated system below the root zone of those plants that you just spoke of. And would the saltwater intrusion and inundation into that system not harm and kill those treatment facilities?
I can't answer that. I don't know.
And respectfully, I understand that there's no state law that says you have to do this, but you guys have far exceeded many of state law requirements and local requirements as well. And I'll just go back to my comment that it is well understood and it's well expected that parts of our communities, Kent Island specifically, Kent Narrows even more so, will be underwater soon. And I'd like to be cautious in our approach to this, that as sexy and appealing as these pictures are to me as a biologist and a stormwater professional, I want to make sure that they look just as attractive and even function to your specifications. And so I need to hear some reassurance from someone, somewhere, that says we have looked at sea level rise in this vicinity. Our elevations are outfalls, we have backflow preventers on them, we have skippity-doo-dahs in place that will help mitigate whatever we're supposed to get and is predicted. Otherwise, we're short-sheeting ourselves in this situation. As nice as this is, and as apparently as effective and efficient as it appears to be, and I fully agree with your assessment thus far, I'm looking 20 years down, 30 years down the road, that may not be the case. And are we being short-sighted in installing these at elevation X, which appears to be 5 on the, specifically, I can't find the page because I'm limited space up here, but it's on your plan, I saw it the other day, that those facilities will not function as intended with that increased sea level rise.
Subjectively, what that elevation could or might be in the future is I don't know. I don't think.
Now I really can't see. Somebody's leaning against the wall.
I think the elevation is somewhere around 5. But I don't know.
I'm sorry, you were saying?
As far as the design's concerned, I mean, we've met current regulations and exceeded those. I can, from a simple flow perspective, I don't remember the number, but I think the floor elevation of that particular facility, 10-1, is at a 5 floor elevation, which is substantially higher than low tide, mid tide in that regard. So if there were, like I said before, if there were a backflush condition where that water could hold in there and then slowly release, there are simple modifications. If 20 years down the road things change, these facilities can be retrofitted.
I hear you clearly, and respectfully disagree in that 100-year flood that you have designed for will now be every 10 years or 20 years, whatever that number is. It's coming, it's expected, and it's real. And there is significant evidence that says portions of our county, mostly the western side, will face significant flooding and more frequent, intense rainfall events. And you're not providing what I'm asking, and if you need to get back to me, I'm happy to hear that. But as we just discussed with the library plan, water quality is important to me, and it's important, I think, to a lot of, if not everyone in this room, right? That's a major reason why we all live and love our county so much. And I want to make sure we have the best protective mechanisms in place that will respond or react to changing environmental conditions that are coming. And so I'll leave it there, but please know that's a major concern.
Understood.
And we appreciate that. I mean, the difficulty that Four Seasons or anybody else has in doing this is that type of leadership really needs to come from the top down. And for individual property owners or who are doing projects, and like you said, have already far exceeded the regulations in terms of water quality and so on, to individually say, well, we'll do this and we won't do that in anticipation of what, is very real in terms of coming down the pipe, is difficult. I mean, it really has to be a leadership from the top down. And if the county takes that leadership role and says to the individual property owners and developers, hey, we want to prevent these things from being at certain elevations because and they have that authority regulatory-wise, and I don't disagree. It's just very hard to do individually.
Mr. Stevens, I do greatly appreciate that, but I would also respectfully put it back on the applicant to be the leader. Show the county, show the community that, wow, yeah, we might be underwater, and rather than go back 20 years and dig out this submerged gravel wetland and put in widget Y, and to treat this change in elevation because our feet are wet now when we walk around our pond, or we're not treating the stormwater to the degree that we're expected and it's supposed to take care of the aquatic resources down gradient, then shame on this room for sort of spinning our wheels and coming to this point, right? It's tremendously more economically beneficial to do it now and treat for the expected and the projected. There's no question about that. Than it is to go back and retrofit when we go, oh shoot, we got our elevations, our projections, instead of every 100 years, it's every decade or whatever that number happens to be. And I'll stop kicking that dead horse. Mr. Glass, are you the person to whom I should speak about the planting species, the landscaping?
No, sir, that's coming up.
Okay, fantastic. I'll hold my next question. Thank you.
Thanks, Tim.
Thank
Can
you
I
all.
just ask a follow-up to Tom's question about stormwater? Is it feasible for you to model using the projections that we had described to us in a presentation by the Land Conservancy just a few months ago, to model how your systems would work in 2050 based on their projections of the sea level rise and the stormwater increases?
Yes, ma'am. I mean, sea level rise would essentially affect the outfall condition of these ponds. So it's more of what is that number?
But there are people who've projected those numbers.
What is that
for
elevation that would
2050
affect
and
our?
20 I don't have all
And
the
that's
details.
the-
I think I might have the report with me, but I don't have all
Yes.
the details with me in my head.
To answer your question, though, yes, we would be able to evaluate that if the sea level rise were
Coastal flood vulnerability study, are you familiar with
not,
that?
ma'am.
Queen Anne's County. I mean, that might be helpful to the people buying your properties to see within their lifetime of ownership of those properties whether or not these systems are likely to satisfy the need for drainage and water quality. It might be helpful to us to know that. I understand Mr. Stevens' point about compliance with the law is obviously what's necessary for you to do, and this goes beyond what the law requires of you, but I'm thinking it might be helpful.
It's just not a legal issue. I mean,
Yeah,
it is.
it
It
isn't.
is. There's there is process in terms of these plans and what we're required to do.
Mr. Stevens, we need you to speak up, please.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's just not a legal issue. It's a process issue as well in regards to the review process that these plans go through, the regulators that review them, all the way from the state critical area regulations and their staff, MDE, all the way down to county public works. And if the county adopts provisions and says, we want you to look at this, then everybody's going to do it. But for individual projects to come in and say, well, I'm going to take this study, but wait, there's a better study over here, and we're going to do that. And the commissioners say, well, we want you to look at this study that we have no idea you guys even looked at. It's not a feasible thing for us to do, nor do we think it's within the scope of the development review of the project. And we're not trying to belittle any of the issues. We're really not. And this project has exceeded their requirement in every other aspect and exceeds the requirements here. We're out of the floodplain.
I understand that. I understand that. I recognize that it's a burden that is not imposed on you in any regulation or law that exists. And actually, your stormwater man says it is feasible to do. I mean, it may not be. I don't know how difficult it is. I just thought it might be useful to know when we are approving 1,000 homes, to know if we're approving infrastructure that's going to be useful to them in the first owner's lifetime in the home. I mean, I think we have some obligation as a government to look out for the people who are going to buy in the communities that we're approving. And if we've been made aware that there are these problems forthcoming that Tom has described so much better than I can, then I just thought if we had a mechanism to look at it and to help guide our decision-making, that would be useful.
I agree, if there's a mechanism, but there doesn't exist a mechanism.
Pardon me?
The mechanism doesn't exist, is my point. The mechanism should exist through you all and regulations that are put down in terms of what Four Seasons and those developers need to apply. So I mean, I understand what you're saying, but and certainly we've looked at floodplain issues and we're out of the floodplain we are not have any impacts on the floodplain overall in the development. So I understand.
And Mr. Glass just told us it was feasible to do, so. Anyway, I'm not going to argue the point.
My question is, conceptually, if there was the idea implanted, thrown out there about maybe installing some kind of backflow, a backflow preventer within the pipe, I know that they make some of these things, that's a amenable solution to concerns that have been raised. Is that something that you'd be willing to address? And
That's a fairly easy retrofit to the existing design. Floodgates, there's a similar term for that. But yeah, I mean, outfall pipes, to the extent, if there was let's say a projected future flood elevation 20 years from now that rose by a foot or two and started to show impacts to those lines, a backflow preventer type of a mechanism on the outfall pipes is certainly a reasonable way to get around that issue.
Specifically on, I found it now, on C-102 of Lane's plans, the submerged gravel wetland cell number 13 actually is in an elevation of +5. So that's not just, that's well above the outfall. That's actually the facility itself.
The floor elevation.
That's correct.
Yeah.
I mean, when you say floor, that's not what I'm seeing. That's the excavated elevation?
No, that would be the surface that you would see right there.
Right.
Or
Okay.
that one.
So that's obviously well inundated by a +3 or even more. Right, I'm looking at the
Not-
sheet, and it has your
There's well,
flood zone AE and flood zone X intersection runs right through the middle of cell 13, or stormwater gravel wetland number 13, cell 2. I go back to my earlier comment of questioning the functionality and the lifespan of these facilities to react and treat runoff to the degree that you have calculated and specified.
well, in those specific examples, all of the outfall structures where the floor elevation is maintained, similar to the picture in front of you, see that round dome right there? That's controlling the outfall. So in order for the water to be backflow from a high tidal surge event, that water would actually have to be at elevation 6 in that particular design, because that weir wall controls the wet water elevation from a 5 to a 6. So the outfall structure itself almost acts as that backflow preventer before that water gets back and starts to intermix with any gravel media or plant material that's behind it.
Because you'd have to have that head pressure to push it up that
You
pipe
have
to
to
that
have a
elevation.
water elevation higher than a 6 in order for anything to flow backwards over that weir.
Unless you've got 6 inches of rain then on top of that. But yeah, I understand your concept of
So
it.
those backflow prevention sort of automatic flushes, if you had an open culvert, are not possible, because everything all of these systems has to drain up and over an outfall, down into a pipe, and then out the pipe.
Okay, thank you.
I'm confused, so the retrofit can work, or?
That's a different scenario. This almost is a backflow preventer the way it's been designed, but the way I understood the question was, in my mind as an engineer, there are other scenarios whereby a check valve or a floodgate valve could be installed on a pipe that needs to be retrofitted so that it would prevent backflush. In this case, all of our structures almost automatically act as that control anyway, up to at least an elevation 6.
And that would be the lowest elevation that would be at?
Correct.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you all.
Ken Schmid on from Traffic Concepts. Ken has done, and his company has done all the studies from 1999, actually, when this was I think a 1,500 unit development with commercial component, 300,000 square foot commercial component, down to its most recent, which is the 1,079, actually phase 2, which is less than that. So Ken's going to walk you through that, what he found during the APF in 2004, when the traffic APF was approved by the county. Then we entered into the development rights agreement with the county, and then what his most recent study in regards to phase 2 found and concluded. And then also, touching upon the Saturday and Sunday issues that we all have, down in the Kent Island area. And now, if we go drive down there right now and we try to go over the bridge with one lane, we got those issues. So, Ken.
My name is Ken Schmid. I'm with the firm Traffic
which-
Concepts. We're located in Hanover, Maryland. Like Joe said, I've been involved in this project since 1998, when this was a much larger project and a commercial development and a much larger impact. The main work we did was from 1999 through 2004, when the Adequate Public Facilities Study was actually approved and the DRA was developed to identify what needed to be done to support the development that we had proposed. We do that by doing traffic impact studies, and traffic impact studies are basically studies that are done to support the county adequate public facilities law that mandates certain levels of service must be maintained at intersections within the county and state control nearby the development. We go through a scoping meeting with the county and the state and establish the criteria, establish the intersections we have to study. We establish the trip generation rates and the background or pipeline developments that are active in the area that we should consider, the impact of that. And it basically, the scoping letter sets out the parameters of how we put together the study.
And the county gives you that scoping letter, right?
The county gives you a scoping letter and identifies those key intersections. And in this case, we've been pretty consistent on all the studies we've done. We've pretty much studied the entire island of Kent Island. We studied the Route 8 corridor through the interchange with Route 50 down to Pier 1 Road and up to Route 18. We studied the area around Castle Marina Road and 18, all those intersections around that area. Crossed the bridge to the south side and looked at Postal Road and Old Dominion Road and that side of the island as well. Traffic studies are done in 3 phases, basically. The first stage is the existing conditions. So what we do is go out and identify what the peak hour traffic volumes are at these key intersections. Generally in the weekday in the morning, that hour of heaviest traffic occurs between 7 and 9 in the morning. And in the afternoon on a weekday, it generally occurs between 4 and 6 in the afternoon. So we go out and do traffic counts with people or cameras that record the amount of traffic that flows through the intersection for that 2-hour period, and we isolate that peak hour of time within that 2 hours, and that establishes our existing traffic volume conditions. Queen Anne's County, like many other counties throughout the state, including State Highway, use a method called critical lane volume analysis, which to assign a level of service. And basically what the critical lane volume methodology does is it calculates the amount of people per lane that travel through an intersection that compete for the same space in that intersection. So if you're driving on Route 8 through the Airport Road intersection and one person's going north on Route 8 and one person's going south on Route 8, they can travel through the intersection without competing with each other. So they're not critical movements to each other. But if there was somebody making a left turn coming north on Route 8 and crossing someone going south, they are critical to each other, so that's 2 critical trips. And depending on the number of critical trips and the volume and the number of lanes carrying those volumes, you come up with a grade, basically A through F. A being the best critical lane situation, F being the worst. Queen Anne's County has a criteria that says that all intersections have to work at a C or better level of service, which is pretty stringent for the state of Maryland in the growth area. They do allow D levels of service at certain intersections if approved by the planning and zoning director, but most likely they look for C level service. So we calculate the existing level of service based on critical lane, based on our traffic counts, and we establish that first level existing conditions. The next situation is what we call background conditions, which it'll become more important later on when we talk about that. But background conditions are 2 things. What are the pipeline projects that are active? Are there active projects in the area that are also trying to develop within your traffic shed? And if they are, we're required to consider their impact in our analysis. So the county identifies a number of background developments. I think in a 2004 study, there was about 14 background developments we included in our analysis. But the second phase of that background development is what's called regional growth. And regional growth is supposed to be the growth in traffic along the road system that occurs outside the island. So the growth in traffic in Annapolis, the growth in traffic in Queenstown or Easton, that transit Route 50 or through Kent Island. And we factor in a growth for that as well. And that growth rate that we have to factor per year is a 2% increase in traffic along in regional growth. And for the 4-season study, we had a 12-year build-out period in 2004, so we added 24% to the existing volume to predict regional growth. Now, we've had this discussion with the county many times, and we don't really believe there's a lot of regional growth along the Route 8 corridor. It dead ends at one end and dead ends at the other. So we think we way overestimate because we do add this 2% growth rate to the Route 8 intersections and corridor. Same with Route 18. The regional traffic on Kent Island is on US 5301, except for bad summer days. But any regional growth occurs along 50. Doesn't necessarily occur along Route 18, that Route 18 corridor that we studied all along. So what we did, we add 2% growth to all those volumes we did to account for some regional growth. And then the final stage is to do the future conditions. What are we anticipating to generate in terms of traffic, and how does that traffic affect the intersections? And again, we calculate a level of service. So I think you can look at the first slide you have up there. This is a slide that shows in 2004, the actual volumes from that study showed the critical lane analysis volumes for existing conditions during the AM. And then the second column over is the 2018 existing actual volumes that we counted in 2018 for this study. And as you can see, the volumes, the critical lane number did go up for every intersection, and that's expected because as traffic has built out and developments have built out and regional growth has occurred, there has been more traffic through intersections, so thus a higher critical lane volume. But you can see in the morning that all the critical lane volumes at these intersections, the study intersections we looked at, are all A or B levels of service, which are acceptable conditions. And the second column is, the second set of columns is the PM peak during the weekday. And again, you can see that the 2004 volumes we counted were lower, such a lower critical lane volume. In 2018, we counted existing traffic again and found higher critical lane volumes because we've had developments build out. We've had developments that we didn't know about in 2004 come online and build out. So it shows a higher volumes and higher critical lane volumes in 2018 than compared to the original study in 2004. And that's expected. The next slide shows me what the 2004 background numbers were that we forecasted. Again, this is that existing volume we counted in 2004, plus all the pipeline developments, plus this 2% growth for 12 years. As you can see, back in the original study in 2004 predicted some C and D levels of service at the intersections up at 50, 301 interchange with Route 8.
This, just to be clear, this was what was in the APF study, the APF
The first
approved
column,
study.
the
Okay.
first column under AM is what,
And it said this is what the future condition's going to be.
Without Four Seasons.
Without Four Seasons,
Before
but with growth in the region and with the
yeah.
projects on the
Right.
pipeline, okay.
and then the next column, next to each one, AM and PM, it shows what we actually counted, our existing traffic volumes we counted, which should match or not exceed what we had predicted at this point without Four Seasons. And you can see, most of the predictions we made in 2004 were well over what actually occurred. And I think the majority of that has to do with this regional growth. I just don't think it occurs on Kent Island because of the unique situation. If the regional growth is going to occur, it's going to occur along 50, not 18 in Route 8. So I think we added that 25% volume push to these numbers, and they just didn't appear. They just didn't occur. The background's built out, but they didn't occur. So all our projections for existing volumes are much lower than what the projected background was from the 2004 study. And this slide you have up here is Four Seasons Phase 2 future weekday intersection analysis results. So this is what we calculated with all of Four Seasons Phase 2. Phase 1 is already as a pipeline development. Phase 2 is what we're here today. And we added that up with our new study and calculated levels of service at the various intersections, and all the intersections are working at B, C levels of service or A levels of service with our most recent study. So what it's telling us and telling me is that the study we did in 2004 over-predicted traffic. We're well under the amount of traffic and the levels of service that we had predicted in 2004. And that there hasn't been a significant change on the island traffic that would make the results of the 2004 study invalid. And the 2004 study did recommend certain improvements. A lot of them have been done. The roundabout's been reconstructed. The Castle Road has been dualized, and the hiker-biker or the trail crossing has been updated and modernized. There's been turn lanes added to Piney Creek Road by this development, and there's other contributions that this development will make towards future improvements deemed necessary by the county and the state.
Can you take just a minute to talk about Saturday, Sunday, because that's just, it's the elephant in the room all the time.
Okay.
So just take a minute.
Well, the county had asked us this time we didn't look at we didn't look at the peak summer during the original 2004 study. It wasn't required. The adequate public facility law requires you to look at the typical day and typical weekends. You don't look at the worst days of the year. Nobody does that, and the state of Maryland doesn't do that when they do forecasting studies. But the county wanted to see the information about the summers, so we did Saturday and Sunday non-summer. These counts were done in October and some in March, and they were factored up. And you can see that during the Saturday and summer non-summer months, we still have acceptable operating conditions along 18 and Route 8, and that's mainly because we're not having anybody divert off of 50 at that time, because 50 is able to handle the traffic without it diverting off.
During non-summer times.
Non-summer
Okay.
time. But during the summer times, we went out and counted, and frankly, we can only count the amount of traffic that goes through the intersection. And I feel like this is, we discussed whether this would make any sense to do this analysis or not, but the county wanted to see the counts and the numbers. So we counted numbers and we calculated levels of service, but we know that those levels of service are not correct. There was, during our counts, we have cameras, we have people that are counting, and most of these intersections were not flowing freely. Traffic was crawling through the intersection, so thus we didn't count many cars going through the intersection. I'm not going to sit up here and say that summer weekend time periods don't have congestion that spell out onto these local roads. They do, but that's a regional impact, and we typically don't have to address regional impacts like the Ocean City traffic when we're doing a localized traffic impact study.
There's really nothing you can do for that.
No, that's really, I mean, that's a responsibility of the State Highway Administration, Federal Highway Administration, and we can talk about it, whether they've done a good job or not, but there needs to be some things done to help ease that summer traffic.
So just to put that in context, because it took me a while to understand it as you were explaining it over the past couple months, but when you look at
Explain that
summer.
better, because this is going to be on the TV. People are going to look at those numbers and say, no way.
Right, that's exactly right. That's the whole point of this, and we debated whether to put them in, but we're like, we have to. How can we not
Better
talk
say it
about
out
that?
loud and clearly.
Right.
Well, on 2018, every Saturday summer critical lane volume has an asterisk next to it. And that asterisk down below
we're gonna-
says, means summer congestion just disrupts traffic flow and skews level of service
That
results.
doesn't explain it either. That-
Okay.
What,
The point is that you can only count so many cars, so many cars go through your counter in an hour because they're going 5 miles an hour.
exactly.
That's correct.
Exactly.
And
That's the
they
point.
they are not allowed to travel through the intersection due to
So it's clear for everybody that watches
latent
this on the
demand
TV.
from intersections down the street, right? So
And the Sunday counts they did in the late afternoon, so they,
these were dictated by the scoping meeting. We did these between 3 and 6 on Sundays. And we know from experience that weekends can be, the peak flow can alter from 12 to 1 if it's a crappy day down the ocean and people just want to get out of there. Or if it's a really nice day down the ocean, they want to stay as long as they can, and they tend to leave at 2 and 3, and then the levels of service are, the delays come much later in the afternoon. So we know that there's a problem in the summer. No development we've done on Kent Island has had to look and deal with the summer regional issues, and there's no reason to. We didn't in 2004, and there's no reason to think that we should be responsible for trying to fix something that we could never fix ourselves.
okay. All right.
Any questions, Sheila?
Well, I understand that models are based on, and they have to be, based on assumptions and averages and typicals. I question some of the assumptions in your model. I know you have to have them there. One of the things I question is, I did read your traffic studies. I went to the staff meeting and heard the talk about
Sheila,
traffic studies.
Could you get-
Yes. One of the assumptions that I question is the projected reduction in travel by people over 55 who would reside in this community. We had a letter from someone who's planning to move into the community, and he gave a projection reduction in travel by people over 55 from another state that was actually different from yours. And I'm over 55, and it certainly doesn't fit my experience that we travel 3.5 times less than, I think that was your number, than the average 54-year-old or 53-year-old. But I understand you have to use averages, but I do question that. But the other thing is the typical, you kind of dismiss that the weekend, and it's not weekend anymore, it's Thursday through Monday, phenomenon of beach traffic that uses Queen Anne's County as a transit, as being something you can't control. It's not attributable to this development per se, of course. But it seems to me that if you are a county through which people must travel to get to the beach, that is a real factor in traffic. And the fact that it doesn't fit a model because you can't count the cars if they're standing still, it looks like it's fine, doesn't change the fact that for 4 days a week or 2 days a week or whatever, depending on the week, you may not be able to move around. And when we're considering communities, it isn't, I realize you're just ameliorating for the additional impact of your community. you can't ameliorate for Ocean City traffic, but you do have to consider, it seems to me, what the real situation is and whether or not it's going to be tenable to the people who are moving around, who need to move around on those roads. And people have to understand that, we have to understand when we're saying, sure, put in 1,000 homes, that you already have a website set up that 90% of which, a Facebook page set up where 90% of the purpose of the page is to complain about the traffic on Ken Island in Route 8 and 18 and on Route 8, but particularly on Route 18. So I find it troublesome that, I'm glad the commissioners asked you to look at the weekend traffic, but I find it troublesome that basically your result says it's A and B. And I know, and you've explained why, or actually our attorney has explained why, I understand that, but I think there needs to be another kind of model for situations where roads don't fit the typical pattern that most of your traffic is between 7 and 8 in the morning on weekdays.
It's a bunch of questions there.
I know.
Let me try to think back.
It was basically just.
When we first started this project in 2000, there wasn't a lot of information on age-restricted large communities like this.
Right.
And what we decided to do with the county and the state is to count 4 of them. One was in Virginia, one was in New Jersey that KHOV had, and 2 were in Anne Arundel County, Heritage Harbor and another one. And we came up with trip generation rates that were higher than what the IT trip generation manual told me they would, but lower than a typical single-family home. Now, I'm not saying they generate about half the trips of a single-family home. What they don't generate is the peak hour AM and PM trips. Some of the people will obviously work when they're 55 and older. They may go to work every day, but much bigger percentage don't in the 55 and older communities. And if they're volunteering and they're going to go out somewhere, they typically don't go out at 7:30 in the morning, and they're not traveling across the bridge. They may be going to somewhere on Ken Island. And they tend to trip, our data and our studies show that their frequency of their trips peak between 11 and 3 during the day, and then about 3:30 they went home. And so when you're talking about the 2 to 3 times impact, it's not daily trips, it's the peak hour trips.
Will this
during the peak
community
time.
have a shuttle bus and public transportation like Heritage Harbor and some of these others that you've used for comparison?
That question's probably better for Mike Irons, who's the company president. He'll be up in just a minute.
Okay.
And, the summer weekends,
I would think that might cut down on car traffic if you have public transportation, which we really don't.
to address the summer traffic again on Saturdays and Sundays, the state has been in a program for years to try to spread traffic flows out, to try to educate people when the best time to travel the bridge is and not. They have the Reach to Beach program it's just been 25 years where they have state vehicles out on the road to try to assist incident that occurs to get them off the road, or somebody with a flat tire to get them back on the road. I think a lot of the problems along here, I think the study that the state did last summer in 2018 showed that during the study times that they looked at, of the 22 Saturdays and Sundays they looked at, 17 of them had accidents occur. And the accidents lead to increased delay. But again, it's a selected time. We know when they're going to be there. They tend to get a little bit longer, a little in the spring, a little bit more in the fall, but generally the most about now.
But we can, I think the crux of it is, for the purpose of this or any other development that you're working on in the area, if this doesn't happen, if phase 2 doesn't move forward, does that change at all what's happening in regards to the regional issues?
No, and if we do build, the amount of traffic we're generating during that time is a drop in the bucket to compare what's out there today.
All right.
Not going to exacerbate this.
Any other
situation.
questions?
Thanks,
Thank you.
Mike and Lisa first, come on up, Lisa.
Let him finish. So,
I have Lisa and I have Mike Irons.
can they go together? No, are they separate?
They're semi-together.
Are they both necessary?
We're going to do it separate, Commissioner.
Okay.
Anyway,
'Cause
I'm
you-
sorry.
You haven't withheld your 8-minute promise for
I know,
each client.
there've been a lot of
Not-
questions,
not
too.
Withholding our questions, they haven't maintained their 8 minutes, Joe, so.
Self-imposed, which I
Yes.
probably shouldn't have mentioned in the beginning. After
Yeah, we know
Mr.
you
Griffith
very well.
spoke, I should have
We
amended that.
know you very well.
After that.
Yes, ma'am. Ouch.
I'll try and go quickly.
Yeah,
Just
let's-
to-
yeah.
Please identify yourself and who you're with.
Do you want me to do it? You want
I
to
can
do
do
it?
it.
Okay, there you go.
My name is Lisa Biddle. I'm a landscape architect with Land Design. We're in Alexandria, Virginia, and we're the landscape architects on the project. And I'm going to be speaking today about the amenity areas of the project and the enhanced landscape features of this site. In particular, the Four Seasons Boulevard main entry, the new signage monument there, the Four Seasons Boulevard landscape experience, the landscaping around each of the condo buildings, and the Bayside condo buffer between the new condos and the existing community, and the Chester House, the clubhouse. This is an illustrative plan of the new community entrance for Phase 2. It is on the west side of Castle Marina Road, directly adjacent from the Phase 1 entry monument. I believe Mike will show some images of the Phase 1 entry. This Phase 2 entry shows 2 flanking ponds on either side of Four Seasons Boulevard with a tower to match, similar in style and character to the tower on the Phase 1 entry, and a signage wall that wraps around with extensive landscaping on the backside of it, buffered between the homes. This is an elevation of that westernmost sign. So the character and style of this is consistent with the Phase 1. The same stone, the same stucco will be used on this kind of mirror image of the Phase 1 entry. Moving along Four Seasons Boulevard from that entry experience, these are the typical landscape plans for the intersections and median of Four Seasons Boulevard, approximately a mile-long road. So at each of the intersections, there will be enhanced landscaping, as shown in the middle plan, with ornamental trees, shrubs, ground covers, and ornamental grasses. And then so there's 12 of those. And there are 4 mid-block medians along some of the longer median stretches of Four Seasons Boulevard, where there will also be enhanced landscape features. Moving back to the Phase 2 condominium area, as Barry and Mr. Cahoon have already mentioned, there's 5 condo buildings. Each condo building will have a landscape typical plan, which I'll show in a second. And this diagram on your screen also shows on plan bottom, on plan south, the existing Bayside condominiums and the extensive landscape buffer between them and the condo building homes. So the landscaping at each condo building is a typical foundation landscaping with ornamental trees, ornamental shrubs, ground covers, flowering species in order to enhance the users and their guests as they walk in and out of their homes every day. Of note, I think, on this plan is the extensive landscaping in the rear of the building that is there with trees and shrubs in order to enhance the views of people walking by on the community trail behind the condos, as well as the views from future condo buildings that might see the backside of these condos. So we've done extensive landscaping in the back of the condo as well. This is some graphics of the Bayside community buffer. So on plan south, between the new condos and the Bayside condos, there's proposed a 3 to 5 foot high rolling berm with plantings. These plantings will be a mix of shade trees, ornamental trees, and evergreen trees. It runs for about 750 linear feet between the road and the end of the condos and is 40 feet wide. This is consistent with the preliminary landscape plan that was made in 2004. Now I'll walk you quickly through some of the amenities in the Chester House, the main clubhouse of the community. Design of this clubhouse is all about maximizing the great natural setting that is here on the Chester River. It's the extension of the Four Seasons Boulevard, gets you into the clubhouse area, and we've maximized views to the river at each of these locations. And I will now walk you through some of the main feature amenities. So on Plan North is the clubhouse building itself and the amenities that are tied to that. And the immediate environs of the clubhouse include most of the amenities for the Four Seasons residents. There is on Plan South a small auxiliary parking lot and sport court facility and community dog park and playground, which I'll talk about in a second. But there are two areas where the amenities sit within this parcel. Moving back to the clubhouse, some of the main amenity spaces are for community events for the residents of Four Seasons at Kent Island. And those include a formal events lawn, amphitheater with stage, outdoor kitchen and dining terrace, fire pits, grills, designated golf and golf cart parking. Sorry, designated bike and golf cart parking. A yoga lawn, outdoor pool with infinity edge, outdoor spa. And then on the Plan South, the sport court area, there's 4 pickleball courts, 2 multi-purpose courts, about a 0.3 acre community dog park that's separated into large and small dog park areas, a small playground, and a small parking lot area as well. Lastly, along the shoreline buffer, this is a landscape plan showing the 150-foot shoreline buffer, the plantings within it of native shade trees, basescape shrub mix, sorry about that, and warm season grass mix. This plan is consistent with the approved buffer management plan, and we have worked with the Critical Area Commission to review these plans, and they're in agreement that these are in conformance with the 2004 approved plans. And that concludes my portion.
Oh, I'm sure you have a question.
Yes, Ms. Biddle, beautiful landscaping. You have a very, very good eye for that sort of thing. However, I'll cut right to it in the excess of time, in that I have difficulty understanding why certain non-native species were chosen for some of the plantings that were beyond the 150-foot shore buffer. We require in the county and many areas that native tree species in particular be planted. They adapt best to our climate. They're of immense habitat value. Their carbon sequestration is greater. And I would like to see only native plant species and shrubbery and grasses planted throughout the community, in short. And if I'm welcome for your feedback on why you chose Japanese black pine, for example, as one of your evergreens. But if you have a commentary, that's fine. But I have a problem putting non-native plants in the critical area.
Well, I guess in the critical area, are you speaking of the 150-foot shoreline
1,000 foot
buffer?
critical area.
The 1,000 foot, okay. Yeah, we used a mix of ornamental trees. Many of them we tried to use natives. I think we have a lot of red maples, a lot of oaks on the property. There are instances, especially around the clubhouse, where you do want something that's a little more ornamental in nature. And so we've selected species that we feel like are appropriate in this climate for those areas. Yeah.
Was that a cost decision?
No. You know, native. I think one of the biggest issues with native species right now is the sourcing of them, and sourcing of them, and
They can't buy them.
the ornamental qualities of them. And so we've used species that will be four-season interest. They flower in the summer, spring, long seasons. They have color in the fall. They have nice branching patterns in the winter. So we've prioritized plantings that can live all 4 seasons, live well.
Sourcing problem because everybody's requiring native plants now? Is it hard to keep?
I'm looking to purchase or to build a nursery business.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Lisa.
Thank you.
Now, finally, Mike Irons, who is the division president for K of
the
Nanny.
shortest, right?
Yeah, and well, Mike has, I'm going to ask Mike right here, that I know you got quite a few slides, which are really great, but if you could not speak to everyone maybe and move through the ones that you don't feel like you have to speak to. And
Absolutely.
you have the transportation question from Ms. Tolliver as well.
Absolutely. Good afternoon. My name is Mike Irons. I'm the division president for K of Nanny Homes. I'm Queen Anne's County resident. Been involved in Four Seasons since 2003. Been waiting for this day for a long time to be before you here with Phase 2. And a lot has changed since we've been at the Planning Commission in 2005. A lot has happened. And specifically, Four Seasons is now a community. It's a community. It's a community full of residents, active adult residents. And right now we have 39 families who proudly call Four Seasons their home. These families are excited to see their community grow, excited to see a world-class amenity being built, as well as welcome new neighbors. And we have a good portion of them here today. I'd like to show a quick hands of our Four Seasons residents. Please raise your hands. So you can see, a lot of them here are in support of what we're doing at Four Seasons. Most importantly, what's in front of you today, obviously we have a subdivision, a site plan for some condominiums, but most importantly is our amenity. This is a world-class amenity. We build Four Seasons communities across the country. Four Seasons is our brand name for an active adult community, a 55 and better community. And what's special about those communities is lifestyle. We call them an active lifestyle community. And it's a community, it's a community that has events. They have, they become great friends. There's lifestyle directors. They have clubs. They have things like that. And I'll show you some more about that in a minute. But that's what makes a Four Seasons community great. It's lifestyle, and it's an active lifestyle for people who are similar age. Kids are gone, so first class. It's this facility that's in front of you today is unlike any other in the Mid-Atlantic. This is going to be the premier waterfront destination amenity that's in the Mid-Atlantic area. Here you can see a rendering of what that facility, that community center is going to look like from the water. Obviously, like Lisa said, expansive views, pier. She went through all the great things that's going on outside that amenity. I'm going to go through real quickly what's going on inside that clubhouse. Here you can see another rendering of the pools, perspective view of what that looks like. Lisa explained a lot of it. I won't waste any more time with it. Here's a picture of the front elevation of the building. It's a 24,000 square foot community center. Extensive high ceilings. I'm going to show you the floor plan real quick. Like Lisa said, it does have an indoor pool, large lounge and clubroom area. It has a ballroom that can support 200 people for community events. The exercise and yoga rooms are also prevalent. It's a big part of our community is exercise. They'll bring yoga instructors in, all those type of things. We have billiards and card rooms, meeting rooms, demonstration rooms. It goes on and on. This is a world-class facility, and we're super proud to be putting in front of you today. So as I mentioned, here's a picture. So right now we don't have a clubhouse, but all of our residents, have that want to see that active lifestyle. And we have a full-time activities director, and we've started having classes, yoga class. Here's a picture in our sales center of many of our residents doing yoga. So this is starting to show you a little bit of the lifestyle. We have a walking club that the residents are currently using the Cross Island Trail and other trails in the county, but they're anxious to have the trails that Barry and the team described earlier as part of their route. We have Chickadee cook-offs. This is all part of the lifestyle of Four Seasons community. And lastly, we just had a fall festival a few weeks ago. We set up a tent behind our model homes and had a great turnout of our residents. So I'm going to go over real quick. Steve, Mr. Cahoon, and Joe mentioned earlier about our DRRA, the Developers' Rights and Responsibilities Agreement. And that agreement had many specific things that we were required to do, some responsibilities. I'm going to go through some quick photos of what we've completed from that agreement. And there's some significant infrastructure improvements here that we've built for the county. First one is the Route 18 and Casa Marina Road roundabout. There was a roundabout there before. It was much smaller. It was a smaller circumference and diameter and radius. We've enlarged it significantly to accommodate additional flows. And here you can see a picture of that facility. We've also built another roundabout at our entrance to Phase 1. Here you can see a picture of that. This is a county facility, a county road. Our Phase 2 entrance will come off the bottom of that picture. You can see what that roundabout looks like. And you can see also, just real quick, I want to point out, what the rough costs of these facilities are that we've already incurred. The roadside trail that Barry mentioned, this goes from the Cross Island Trail all the way down to the Bayside community. It's been heavily used by Bayside, Queens Landing, all those facilities. Now they have pedestrian and bike access right up to the trail. Also at the trail, where the trail crosses Casa Marina Road, we put in a flashing beacon and installed safety enhancements to ensure safe crossing for people on the trail. Other improvements to Piney Creek Road and Route 18, there's a right turn lane off 18 that we built and a right turn off of Piney Creek Road onto 18 that we built. Those improvements were just completed. Obviously, our water tower has become a new landmark on Kent Island. This water tower is connected to the county water system, provides peak hour capacity for the county and Kent Island water system, as well as it also increases pressure. See what that cost us. We built a significant sanitary sewer pump station that serves not only our community, but it serves Bayside, Queens Landing, and the Casa Marina communities, and takes our wastewater directly to the wastewater treatment plant. The next slide shows a force main that we built across the island, 3 miles of off-site force main that takes our wastewater, as well as Bayside's, Queens Landing, Casa Marina's, across the island. On the way, we pick up Cloverfield's wastewater, and they're using our sewer force main that we constructed as well. And you can see the cost of that, $2.6 million. That's also complete. All these things that I've mentioned are completed and in use today. The water tower, pump station, all completed, functioning, and serving not only our community, but all the other ones I mentioned as well. One of our more significant improvements that we're in design on is a new water treatment plant for the county. We're designing it right now. It'll be complete by the end of Phase 2. It's going to be on the county property where the county has a water treatment plant facility right now, close to the Stevensville Middle School. And you can see the cost of that. And it also includes a significant commercial well. This will drastically improve the capacity and ability of the Kent Island and county's water system. But that's in design right now, and it will be complete by the end of Phase 2. As mentioned before, the 131-acre park, we signed our deed for that to the county. It's going to be eco park. It was done to satisfy only a 27-acre requirement. We're satisfying it with 131 acres. Obviously, a great location for a park, surrounded by creek, the Cross Island Trail. But what's most significant about this is also we gave up 271 homes that were part of our preliminary plan. It was 20% of our original preliminary plan we gave up, and we're giving it to the county.
Yeah, there was a DRRA requirement for 27-acre of parkland that we acquire, and it's being satisfied by this. It's been satisfied because we've deeded it to the county.
We're also required to build a Cross Island Trailhead Park, and that's under construction. It's close to 6-acre property. We're gonna build this park. It's a parking lot for people to get on the Cross Island Trail. It also has a restroom facility with running water, heated. People can park there, get in there, get on a bike or walk. It's a great access for the county residents to access the Cross Island Trail, as compared to using the ad hoc facilities that they have now with porta pots and poor parking. That's under construction right now and likely be finished in the spring. Oops, sorry about that. So Our DRA also requires contributions to the Kent Island Fire Department. It's 430 out is the requirement. To date, we've already contributed 338,000. Next year, we'll donate the last 100,000. In addition to that, each of our residents, as part of their HOA dues, will pay $10 per month per home to the Kent Island Fire Department. Works out to be almost $130,000 a year when we're built out that the fire department will get from our residents. And we've already started collecting that, and like we said, we've already paid $338 to the Kent Island Fire Department. We just paid our most recent payment here in 2019. It was a $1,000 check. Here's a picture of us giving that check to the president of the fire department. Other payments. We paid the county $1 million when we got our Phase 1 unconditional approval. $1 million. We also, as mentioned by our traffic consultant, we're going to pay $350,000 to the county for future road improvements at Maryland 18 and 552. Overall, all these DRA commitments are $27 million. $27 million, of which we've completed over $9 million of those improvements, with more to come as we continue to build the community. What I think what's most important here is 35% of that commitment has been satisfied, and we've delivered 4% of the homes. So we've constructed a considerable amount of upfront, off-site infrastructure that not only serves us, but it serves the whole Kent Island as well. So that was my point there. I'm going to move on. Another important thing I want to point out is right now we're doing, as far as for our stormwater system, Tim Glass mentioned how we sized our sediment basins during construction 300% larger than required, right? 300% larger. And that came from us. We instructed him to do that because we take great pride in our compliance with stormwater. And our stormwater system is, our stormwater practice is to capture as much water as we can and treat it before it runs off. And how we treat it is through what a system called rain for rent. And what rain for rent is it's a filtration system. We literally filter our stormwater through a mechanical filtration system before it gets discharged. And that's to get the turbidity out of the water. The soils on Kent Island have a lot of clay, and that clay never settles out. We've run it through a treatment train of 9 steps, silt fence, ponds, blah, blah, blah. 9 steps, and it still doesn't get clear. We've implemented this system. It's a filtration system. All of our water gets filtered through it. Water basically gets pumped out of our basins. We inject some flocculants into it, natural flocculants that help coagulate that sediment, and drop that sediment out of the water. It goes through these big blue tanks that you see. And inside those tanks are some baffles that allow that sediment and that flocculant to work and that sediment to settle out. Lastly, it comes out of those tanks and goes through a filter system, a micro filter bag that takes that one step out, and then we discharge it out our outfalls. And when it comes out, it's clear. We have technicians on site when they're operating it, they're testing it, making sure that turbidity, all those things are reported to the state. We've had a full level of compliance from MDE for the last year and a half. We've gone through the wettest year in recorded history, and we have a perfect record with the state of compliance with our stormwater system. So, lastly, I have some more photos of our community, looking at some ponds, looking into the Phase 1, just to want to show the quality, the level of quality of what level of quality of Four Seasons community is. You can see significant landscaping, entrance monumentation, fountains in the ponds. Here's our entrance that Lisa spoke about earlier. You can see a photo of that. The Phase 2 entrance will be very similar in material and in scope as that one. We have 5 fully decorated model homes. You can see a picture of them here. We use them as our sales center. Their demonstration models are fully furnished. We staff our sales center 7 days a week, 8 hours a day. Here's a quick aerial view. Like I mentioned, We have 39 residents, families that call Four Seasons their home. We have another 20 or so that are under contract that we're building their home and, actively selling all the time, pursuing more. So a couple quick pictures of our single-family homes. We have 3 series of homes, a smaller one, medium size. The smaller ones are about 1,700 to close to 2,000 square feet. They're designed specifically for 55 and better customers and residents. They're slab on grade, there's no steps. Everything's one level generally. The middle-sized series are more 2,000 to 2,100 square feet, a little wider. All of our homes, in this series have 10-foot ceilings. All the maintenance for these homes, yard maintenance, mulching, things like that, is all covered by our homeowners association. They have no maintenance in their yard or mulch or anything like that. Lastly is our biggest series, the Island Series, a little bit bigger homes, 2,400 to 2,600 square feet. Have some interesting courtyard entries, we call them, it's kind of like a side load entry. So these are homes that are all consistent with the plans that were in front of, part of the preliminary plan. Our condominium buildings it's a 14-unit building. It has garages, one garage per unit on the side. Obviously 4 stories, has internal corridors, has elevators, stairs, internal storage units. The units range in square feet from 2,000 square feet to 2,600 square feet. Here's a picture of the rear. We have balconies, extensive landscaping around them. Kind of go through these. Our first building is under construction. Here you can see some of the framing, stair towers and elevator towers that's under construction right now. Here's an aerial view looking back on, this is a shot, a digital image, looking what the community is going to look like. So we're in the north end of the community up near Cloverfields, looking back towards Phase 2. You can see the amenity and the pier on your left. You can see the pool and things like that. Just kind of an idea of what the community is going to look like when it's fully built out. Lastly, we've won several awards with the quality of our homes, and we're really super proud of what we've done to date, and we're really proud of what we're proposing here in front of you today. And it's a community of high quality, and we're very proud. I'm very proud of it as a Queen Anne's County resident to bring it before you today. Is there any other questions? Yeah, Ms. Tolliver, you asked about public transportation. Right now, we do not have any plan, but as our community continues to grow, and if we see a demand for that from our residents, we do have a lifestyle director. She organizes trips and things like that they will definitely use buses and to take groups of people to a ball game or whatever. But if there's a demand that we see that our residents want some public transportation, we could certainly arrange and put some kind of bus stop or facility in there. But right now, we don't have any plan.
I was just curious about that in relation to the traffic study. I have 2 other questions, and I don't know if you're the right person to answer them, but you're the one sitting there, so.
Okay, I'll do my best.
You're the last one, and these are my last 2 questions. One is a very specific thing. I noticed the parking at the clubhouse had 244 spots, and it looked like there were just 5 that were marked handicapped. I think the ADA standard requires 7 for a commercial property of that size, with that many spots. I don't know,
I'm not
is that
familiar
going to
with
be
that.
ADA compliant?
All I can say, our engineer could probably step up and ask, but the county has done a full review of our plans, and perhaps the county answer that, but I would assume we're in compliance, because here we are in front of you.
Look at ADA compliance on the parking?
I can double check that. but-
Okay, because we would want them to be compliant, of course. And,
Of course.
in a senior community, you might actually
Yeah,
have greater than
yeah.
average need. The other one is a more global issue, and I guess this is also probably more Steve than you, but I know you've probably thought about this. The people born in the last year of the baby boom turned 55 this year, 2019. And the demographics our demographics. The aging population begins to decline. The population who are buying this kind of home after this year. And we've noticed in other parts of the state as close as Two Rivers and Anne Arundel County that communities that were designed for people 55 and over are beginning to ask for exceptions in the later phases of their developments because they're not finding that they can sell as many homes as they had planned to build to that age cohort, and have asked to be able to have market price homes for any age as part of the community. And in other places, people who have bought these homes and want to resell them are finding that the market is more limited because they are limited to a particular age cohort and have begun to ask for exceptions. I'm just wondering, I know this project predates my time in Queen Anne's County by a lot, what kind of protection is built in for the county, because the county's APFO requirements are all based on the premise that there won't be any school-age kids. What kind of protection is built in for the county to ensure that, given the foreseeable demographics, we're not birthing 55-year-olds anymore, what protection does the county have to ensure that this will remain a 55 and plus community?
So all the approvals are premised on that. Everything back from growth allocation, APFO,
Right.
DRA.
And they were in Anne Arundel County for Two Rivers as well.
There were
But then
conditions of
things
approval.
changed.
Conditions of approval.
Two things. They would have to start all over through the process to change those provisions and those approvals. But I think more importantly, and show compliance with what has changed. More importantly, I think there was restrictions put in the covenants that, I don't know if
There are.
Chris can speak to.
They're in there. They have to be for Fair Housing Act purposes.
There were two provisions. Number one, what Chris is speaking to be able to restrict the population of 55 and older, there are specific requirements that need to be in there. There was also specific requirements about the community at large. Their entire community would have to vote to remove such a restriction in the covenants.
That's correct. That's correct.
I can't.
Well, I don't think it's 100%.
No, it's not 100%. But there are several levels of protection. And I think the most important level is that any change that would have to occur to that would have to not only be approved by you, but the county commissioners, because it's in every approval we have as a condition. So if we just said, or in phase 4.5, you said we want to change that, they couldn't do that without this body's
Going back
consent
through the
and without the commissioner's consent and without a reevaluation, as Steve said, of all the premises that we put forth based on the fact that we're 55 and older. That's in addition to the covenant restriction and the other restrictions that are out there. So that's the safeguard, really. I mean, it's up to the county. It wouldn't be up to us solely, it'd be up to the county.
But could you elaborate on the covenant
Growth
restriction?
allocation was predicated upon over 55. Critical Area Commission signed off on the growth allocation on that premise. There'd be, well, that was part of it. There was, can you imagine what the county would hit this up for school impact fees, which they didn't have to pay because it's over 55? It would have to start over completely.
Okay. Thank you.
I'd like to clarify one thing I said, just,
And the traffic, all the traffic counts, as you've heard, are premised on no kids?
Well, they're all A and B intersections, so that wouldn't,
They may not be when there's a bunch of kids in school buses.
they may not be now if you try driving on them.
Yeah, is that one clarification I'd like to make with regard to our stormwater system and our compliance? My statement that we've been in full compliance is for the last 18 months. There was a flood that flooded Kent Island, and we did have an incident there. But since then, going through the wettest year on record, we've had a full compliant report from MDE. I just wanted to clarify that. Any further question?
Thank you. Any other questions from the commission? All right. At this time, the Planning Commission is going to take a 20-minute break, and we will resume at 1:30.
Thank you.